Hi guys, it's Elizabeth, and I did my paper on video games and their uses, and how in the future it can serve as a new platform for feminists. Just a disclaimer, not all video games represent sexual objectivity. The aim of this research is to bring awareness and to stop masculine violence in video games so that those patriarchal ideas are no longer being sold. I support all of those developers who include women and strong independent characters without the sexualization of their bodies. My thesis states, although critics argue that graphic video games attribute to women's sexual harassment in everyday life with the support of masculine violence, it can also be a platform for feminist ideals to be portrayed through entertainment and transform the way culture views sex. For research, I start off with a quote by Anita Sarkeesian. There is enormous potential for inspirational stories that can have positive transformative effects on our lives. This is exactly what I framed my future hypothesis on and what I strive for video games to be. All of these bullet points represent things that I researched. So, I researched Anita Sarkeesian and how she started looking at the negative effects of video games on culture, as well as the tropes of women represented in video games. I researched race and video game interactions and their intersectionalities, the politics behind video games, which is a huge important role within my paper. I also researched the history behind video games and how the stereotype of male video games came about and why it's on demand. Two of the biggest things I researched was toxic game culture and how ramifications affected culture and masculine violence, as well as the objectivity of women. What did I find? These are my insights and analysis findings on my research. How did I do my research? I simply just went to JSTOR or Google Scholar and typed in keywords that I was interested in, such as race and gender intersectionalities in video games and cultural ramifications of video games. One statistic that we talked about in class was how only 11% of developers are women. Video games are definitely authoritarian because there is a superior decision being made in who is deciding the price, the consumer, and region it is sold. How the game is developed and who the developers are, like Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and other companies, choose to design their systems in a particular way to where they control what games are being sold and who are buying them. Lara Croft is a woman of interest in the study of feminist theory in video games. The question came about, is she a feminist icon or a sexualized image? Even though she is a badass character in her video games, she's also sexualized. She has big boobs, a tiny waist, and men love her. The objectivity of women portrays a false image. Video games are very impressionable. Patriarchal images are reappearing in video games, teaching culture that it is okay to treat women this way. It's a circle of life. Cultural ideas of sex presented through video games is happening, and then it is presented back onto impressionable youth. It's just an ongoing cycle. Like I stated earlier, I researched the lack of race and gender intersectionalities. Not a lot of studies have been done on this. And there is a lot of lack. There's a lack of black characters in video games, and if they are in video games, they're stereotyped. This perpetuates a toxic masculinity not only in gender, but in race as well. It's a male white supremacist community. Negative tropes of women portrayed in the ads video games purposefully attract the male audience. This is marketing showing a particular attitude, especially towards women. Video games are a cyborg. They are a system of technology and wires, but relate to the culture in a huge way. It's a huge community telling society how they should act and what they should think. Here are some examples of objectified women in video games. As you can see, in some instances, there's a lack of clothing, or, some areas are bigger than the other. Here's another example. For the future, this is my hypothesis. It's all about change and accountability. People need to stop advertising masculine violence and sexual objectivity. They also need to elicit change in the community. This comes from both the producer and the consumer. Because video games are impressionable, we need to portray a positive image of women so they get more respect. Developers who create a positive female stereotype can change the way masculinity dominates the industry. So, in simpler terms, don't change the technology, but change the consumption and the content. That's it. Thank you for watching my presentation.